I finished my little muzzle here. One thing I wanted to point out, I said as I often will be working, I'll refine designs as I go along. And I decided I kind of liked this little white area between the muzzle and the eye. I thought it would look better if it was connected a little bit. So I just start working some little strokes and smudges, just kind of filling in that brown area between the two so they sort of blended together. And I like the way that looks with some continuity to the two. So you can do that or not, you know, that's your choice. But I don't know, something about this, I like the shape of it. So the last thing I need to do is I need to put some highlights in my eye over here. Do some little dots. And do the little crescent smudge here on the lower left. Smudge that one a little bit more. And add some eyelashes, so I'll go over that again. That was the black mix I made from some burnt umber and a little bit of phthalo blue and some water just to create an inky feel to it. And then I'm going to pull that first lash probably about halfway up the eye and just quickly pull it out in kind of a crescent shape. And then I pull a few more here below it and just vary the length a little bit. So maybe a shorter, a longer, and a shorter. And then above that, I'll start pulling a few that are kind of graduated in length. And then I can just go back and fill in with a few variations in between. So there we have lashes on both sides. We need to do something with this mouth. We haven't quite finished that. So I'd like a little bit, I think, of the pink color that we used on the tongue to fill in that lip. So I'm going to take a little bit of the naphthol red here and add a little bit of white to it and a little bit of water and just color that in a little bit, smudge it in. I'm just using a little, this is a number 4 flat. Just to give a little pink look to the bottom lip. So it's nothing that is going to jump out at you. It's just, you know, just a soft pink color. And then you can go back with a little bit of the white on a liner brush and just hit a little bit of a highlight here and there along the top of that lip. And we could put a little bit of a highlight on the tongue back here. Now the flowers, you can transfer the pattern for your flowers. And we're gonna put some flowers here over the hat band. And I think what I'm going to do is just fill in some centers with white. These are just gonna be little simple like 5-petal flowers. So I'm gonna paint in my centers where I would like them to be, and I'm just going to alternate. I'm going to do one up and one down. And I'm painting them in with white first so that I can go back with the yellow and they'll show up over this green. That yellow is rather transparent. And if you just tried to paint yellow centers, you'd have to have multiple coats of paint to do that. So let's do one more center up here. We'll fill in our petals and see how that works. Now I'm also going to put a little posy of flowers down here by her face. So we'll make these flowers just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to draw in some centers here. And these will be on your pattern. As I said, I'm kind of making some of this up as I go along. We'll do one up here. And one there, and we'll see how that works. You can see I'm kind of putting them in almost like a checkerboard, like 2 and 3, and we might find we want to add maybe another one out here or another one up here to balance it out. Now those, since we're on this light background, I think I can go ahead and just base those centers with yellow. If we were on a darker background, that yellow would be hard to cover. But on this sand colored background, that should work just fine. Our white up there is dry. We can go back and paint those centers yellow. So there we have all our flower centers painted in. And then to get a nice petal shape, I think a filbert brush would work really well. Put this where you can see the tip. The filbert brushes have a rounded tip. They're a flat brush, but the tip's rounded, so that will give us a good start on our flower petals. And we're going to do these in some of the colors that we've used, so we can do some in the blue. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of blue here on my palette. Now this blue is really dark by itself, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of white with it just to make it a softer color. And how dark or light you want is kind of your choice. You can mix in as little or much white as you want. But let's start on this one down here. We're just going to lay the brush down and pull it towards the center and lift up. And these are just going to be loose little daisy type flowers. And this one's going to end up with maybe 6 petals, I think. My paint's a little bit wet, so I'm going to go over these a little. And maybe we like this one up here, the blue also. And this one we're not going to go all the way around. We're going to leave this area here open so that we can put some petals around this flower in a different color. So clean your brush out good to get that blue out of it. And maybe this one we'll do in a pink. So we'll use some of that red. And again, if we pick up a little bit of the white with it, that'll soften that down. And we'll paint in some flower petals with pink. This one I'm using a little more red without the white in it to make it a little bit brighter. And we'll vary the color just a little bit. So we've got this last one back in here, so I think we'll do that one blue also. We haven't used too many colors in this design, so, but this one I'm going to not mix any of the white in with it, and this one will be a little, just, again, we've got a wash of paint on there, so it's not real dark, but it'll be a little brighter blue than the others. Which being back in the shadows is okay. We'll check some little color in here and there. And the other thing we can do is add a few green leaves. So we've got our phthalo green yellow here, and let's pick up a little bit of the raw sienna and mix it in with it just to tone it down a bit. And we can pull some little leaves here and there. And again, I'm using the filbert brush, but I'm turning it the opposite direction. So I'm starting at the base of the leaf and pulling and lifting out to the tip. And just fill in a few green leaves just to balance this flower design out. Maybe here we pull a large one and then pull a couple little small indications of a leaf that are tiny. Let's put one up there. Just wherever you think might balance that out. Now the flower centers are dry, and I'd like to give a little bit more dimension to them by shading a darker color around those. So we can shade those with the raw sienna color, and maybe even add just a touch of the burnt umber to that to make them a little bit darker, and just float around the left side of those. If you want the shading to be a little brighter, just mix in a little bit of the red with the raw sienna. That will give it a more rosy color. shading. And you can layer these too. So see here, I'm putting a little bit of red over it. So we'll let those dry and then we'll do some line work around those. I'm still trying to decide about the dots on the hat brim. I think I would like to do some flowers, and we're just going to do again the pink and the blue, and I'm going to use this little number. I'm going to switch to this number 2 flat. So I want these petals to be real little. So I'm going to use some red and put a little bit of water with it so it flows off the brush. Pull like 6 petals around these. And you can vary the color. Maybe some we use plain red. We'll do some that are a lighter pink color. So we'll maybe make this one a pink. Losing that leaf. And we'll make this one pink. And then we'll do a couple blue. And I'll make one this one over here a lighter blue, which needs a lot more white to show up. And now I'm thinking, I like that light blue, so I think I'll make some of these petals. Add some of that light blue to those. And if you think that red is too bright, we could always go back and put some pink over top of that to tone it down a little bit. I think that looks pretty springy. Now we also need to shade those centers, so I want to keep them a little brighter. So on these, I think I'm going to shade them with the red. So I'm just going to float a little bit of the red around the left side. And that red's pretty transparent, so if you get too much water in the brush and the float, it'll just disappear. So I'm taking a little bit of that out. Maybe we'll add some more of that red into these centers. I like floated layers of color over top of each other, so the raw sienna burnt umber float gives a little more darkness to the red down here. So, but the red floated over top of that dried float of the darker color helps anchor it a little bit more. You can adjust any of your petals that you feel like you need to. Now I think we're sort of down to some detail work on the flowers, so we're going to go back to our black mix, or as I said, you can feel free to use just plain black out of the bottle. I'm mixing up an inky consistency of that, and I'm going to come down here and just very finely outline some of these flower petals. And the centers. And we can outline the leaves and draw some vein lines. Keep these outlines very fine. You don't want them to be like magic marker lines. These are just to add a little crispness to the drawing. You can add some little stems for your leaves. Add some little wrinkle lines coming up through your petals. Just any little details that you want to add. You can add some little dots around the outer edge of the centers, like little seed pods. I'm just dabbing these. There's no actual shape or anything to them, just little smudges of color. And that just defines the outer edge of those flower centers. We can continue doing our flower petals up here. A little more water in my paint. It's getting dry. Sitting under these lights dries things out pretty quickly. So we can do similar on the hatband flowers, just again, just going to dot around the centers with the black mix. That dark against all the bright colors just makes them pop out a little bit more. It's important to have a really good fine liner brush to do this. and to work right up on the tip. With very little pressure, just barely touching the surface. The more pressure you put on the brush, the more you smash the bristles of the brush down, and the wider your line work will get. So you don't want to flatten those bristles at all. You're just working up on the very tip of it. Probably just 1 or 2 hairs. Rest your small finger on the surface, and that will help you control how much pressure you're putting on the brush. You can't just float your hand up in the air and expect to be able to maintain a consistent pressure on the brush. Your hand would shake too much. And I'm not exactly outlining the petals. My line work is very loose and goes often on the edge, which gives it a just a more relaxed, organic feel. It's not, doesn't look so mechanical. So let me zoom in on that a little bit, so you can see that line works very, very fine, and I, hit the edge and I come off. I don't worry about trying to be exact. Same way with the big flowers. You can see it's just loosely outlining it. I go off onto the background, onto the petal, sometimes farther in on the petal. So it's just very, very, very loose. Let's see. Some more little lines there. I'll zoom back out here and need to just do a little bit more work on the bow. It needs some dry brushing. We need to dry brush some white on it to highlight it, and we can do a little outlining on it. So I'm back to my Royal Sabletech round, or any type of round dry brush that you like to use. There's lots of them on the market. Every brush company has their own version, so just pick something that you like. And I'm going to use a little bit of white. I'm blending well into the brush on the palette. And then we're going to just dry brush some highlights where we want this bow to appear like it's coming forward. So on the loops, I usually do somewhere near the center of the loops. And you can extend your dry brushing out beyond where your main highlight is, but you want to keep it strongest in one area and then soften it out into some others, so that it's not just in one spot. And as I said, as the paint starts coming off your brush, you have to brush harder. So I'm really scrubbing down now. And I need to add a little more paint. And that's what happens when you don't make sure the paint's well distributed in the brush. You'll get little nuggets of paint that drop off and aren't as well distributed as the others. You want this real nice smooth dry brush effect, not little splotches of paint. I'm going to go back and dry brush here in the center of the bunny's face again. When you're dry brushing, once it gets really dry, you'll get like a powdery dust on your surface. So just brush that off a little bit once in a while. One thing I do like to do as I'm working on designs is repeat colors. Now right now the bow only has the green. We used a little bit of, I think, the Indian yellow on it and white. But I think it would benefit if we repeated some of the blues into the bow. So I'm going to float a little bit of the phthalo blue here into the shadows. And because this blue's already got it's a real warm blue, so it's got kind of a green cast to it, it'll just really blend into that green. It's not going to jump out at you as a blue so much, but it'll just strengthen those shadows in the green. Plus, even though you don't directly see it, it'll carry your eye through the design because it's repeating that blue. So I'm just coming here along in places where I want the darkest shadows to show. And the other advantage of doing this is sometimes when you dry brush all this white, you have a tendency to get a little bit of a chalky look. And floating some additional color over that will help soften that chalk effect. You can see how that just darkens our shadows just a little bit and brings those blues over into this area of the design. I always like to do outlining, so I'm going to continue the outlining around this bow. And again, I'm just keeping it very fine, very loose. It's just going to give a little bit of detail to the edges. And again, you can see where I'm just coming off the edge. I'm not trying to be real precise. I just want that loose effect of a little bit of outline that carries your eye. But again, the outlining is so fine that it's not going to jump out at you when you look at the design. It just adds a little crispness to the edges. You can also do this around the hat too. You can see where I've done it. It's a very broken line. I'm not trying to do it solid. We're the same width. I mean, you can do the outlining with a fine point marker, but you're not going to get the same effect that you do with a brush, because the brush is a lot more, I guess, natural or variegated. You don't have the same width line. The color will vary as you start running low on paint, so it'll go dark and light. Where if you do the lining with a pen, everything's very precise, the same thickness, the same color. And it really looks more like outlining. And also, to repeat colors, we can add a little bit of, we can either go red or maybe some red and some green in the hat. Let's add some green into the dark shadows. And I'm not going to add the straight green because the green is very intense in color. I'm going to mix in a little bit of the raw sienna to tone that down. And I'm going to come along here and just put a little bit of that green here in these shadows under the hat. And then I'm going to go back and pick up a little bit of the red. And I'm going to add just little accents of red to the top of the hat brim. I don't want to carry this all the way across, I want to just soften it here and there. Just to add a little bit of blush. And we might just want to do it on that side. Maybe pick up a touch up here on the top. Just let that smudge off. Okay. My brush isn't the greatest brush. I'm starting to get some separation in it. Add a little bit down here. I'm just going to add just a little bit of color to the bunny. I've mixed a little bit of the red with a little bit of raw sienna. I'm just going to put just the slightest blush here under the hat brim. Again, this is just kind of softening some of these shadows a little here under the mouth. These are always last minute little details I do to something. I just like to repeat colors here and there. I mean, we could even do something like, and these are very sheer washes. You don't want too much color. But I'm thinking just put a little bit of blue out here, say on the outer edge of his ear, on both sides. And again, that just adds a little bit of shading and is repeating the colors from the design. I don't know if you can tell how that kind of sets the sides of his ears, tones them down a little bit, sets them more into the shadows. Maybe we'll do a little bit of that here, the outer side under the hat. Try not to get on the hat, because that blue over the yellow is going to make it real green. So I'm just trying to do just a bare wash of it. Okay, I think our bunny and flowers and hat are done. Nope, one more thing. I'm going to do a highlight on the flower centers. See, I just keep seeing little things. And we're going to go to some white and just, again, do our little dots on the top right. And you can just vary those a little bit. And you do the ones on the hat brim too. Maybe just one dot on those. And a little smudge on the lower left. Makes the centers look a little more rounded. Okay, just pop that more. But I like some colors on this background here. And it's just a little boring, just being the plain solid sand color. So we're just going to use the colors that we've got on our palette, and we're going to wash some different colors out here on this outer edge. And there I had some blue in my brush, and you can see how that works. But first thing you want to do, excuse me, is just brush a light film of water over an area. We're going to just work a little bit at a time. We don't want to dry too much of this at once. So first I'm going to pick up a little bit of red, and I'm just going to brush that along the edge and a little bit on this into the center. And then you'll take a mop brush, one that doesn't have anything in it, and just soften that color a little bit. So we get just a blush of color there. And you can build these up, it doesn't all have to be in one layer. So maybe sometimes it's easier to work with two brushes, one that you can lay some plain water down, and then one that has your color in it that you can go back and brush some color. And then your mop brush to just soften it. And we don't want to only use red, we want to vary these colors a little bit, so Let's clean that red out of the brush. And maybe a little bit of our water down. Maybe we pick up a little bit of yellow. And you can even mix a couple colors. Put some yellow and add some green to that. Again, while that's still wet, it's important to do it while it's wet, as you're gonna just pounce over that with a mop brush to soften those together. We don't want to put green by the green bow, so let's maybe add some yellow down here. Put some yellow over here by the flowers. And you can also use your fingers to soften the edges a bit. We haven't added any blue, so we're going to put some blue up here above the hat. So I'm going to turn this around and again, this is just a very, very light film of water. You don't want it too puddly. Just enough to let the paint bleed out a little bit. Put a little bit of blue but over here. And these colors really soften up as they dry, so you might decide after you put one layer down and it dries that you want a little stronger color. So just be sure to let that first layer dry and go back and add again another little layer of the water, and you can put in a second coat. So let's see here, I think we could use a little more yellow. Pat that yellow in. Soften it back out. So I think that gives you just a pretty soft background. And again, you can layer the colors a little bit if you want to dry brush a second layer over top of things to add a little more dimension. Doesn't all have to be watercolored, it can be dry brush too. And the last thing I do on these little lace banners is I like the bottom to look a little more lacy. So I'm going to take some of the burnt umber. I don't want this too dark to start. And some of the raw sienna. And float above this lace panel to give it like a kind of an overlay effect. And the pattern for this will be in your pattern. We're just trying to create the look that this is an add-on. And by floating, if I'm tilting this too much for you to see it, by floating above it, it'll give it a shadowed look, and then we'll highlight the bottom with some white, and it'll give kind of a Battenberg lace look to it. You can see I'm just floating this dark color above that little scalloped line. I'm just gonna skip around over my flowers so they look like they're dragging down over top of the line. I don't know if you can see that. That gives it the look that this piece is laid over top of this. So we can emphasize that a little bit more by floating on the bottom side with white. So if we go right up against that line and float with white, you'll have that strong highlight against the shading. And then we're going to take our dry brush I'm working that into the dry brush blender, and we're going to just come through here and just highlight all around these cutouts. And you'll just continue to build that up. So I'm going to work on that, and then I'll come back and we'll do just some little outlining detail and maybe some little stitched lines, and then we should be done with our bunny banner.